Hello, and welcome to the Tennessee Informer. Our topics today are the 4 boxes of liberty, plus we will discuss information from the book American Nations by Colin Woodward about the different groups that settled the different regions of our country and their impact. We'll close out with some local politics. Actually, we're going to change that up a little bit. We're actually going to start with local politics first tonight. Joining us tonight is Dr. Ken Berry. Yes, that Ken Berry. He is an author, an expert in the field of diet and nutrition, has his own practice here in Tennessee. He has a website called drberry.com that you can visit and find out more about eating healthy and all of the good health-oriented issues that he covers. He also has other interests, and that's why he's joining us here tonight. Dr. Berry, I appreciate you being with us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Dave. Thanks so much for having me. I've been a great fan of your YouTube channel for over a year now, and I love the fact that you focus on local issues, local politics, and local elected leaders.
Well, thank you, and I do appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate the kind words there, and I do appreciate you taking your time. As I mentioned, you have a practice in addition to everything else, so I appreciate you working this in the schedule. I think this is the first time that some of our audience will have heard about the 4 boxes of liberty, but they are important, and actually they're really just putting our rights into action. But before we get to that, I think we are going to go ahead and start with some local politics, and I want to turn that over to you. What exactly do you want to focus on tonight for local politics, or today, that is?
Well, Dave, considering recent events that the national media has been covering, that has been completely ubiquitous on Facebook and Twitter and other social media, I'm referring to things that people are very familiar with, sitting there nodding their heads right now like, yeah, I know, that's all you hear about. There's this real danger that somebody who is very well-intentioned, who is well-informed, that what they'll wind up doing is participating in what an author called armchair politics. And so what does that look like in today's modern society with social media everywhere? Well, what that looks like is that somebody who's very interested in politics, they're very interested in making a difference. They're very interested in having real leaders in real positions of leadership. What they're going to wind up doing is they're going to wind up spending hours a day on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and other social media, hearting and thumbs upping and sharing and commenting. And after doing that for an hour or 2 or 3, you feel, as an armchair politics practicer, you feel like you've actually done something to move the needle, right? And I think that's part of the reason that social media is so ubiquitous now. I think that there are powers that be that want you to feel like, man, I really put off a shot today. I shared that thing that dude did, and I retweeted that other thing that other dude did. And really, in reality, Dave, what you wound up doing was a whole lot of nothing. You didn't move the needle at all. And so it's busy work is what it is. Now, is it busy work that was designed by the powers that be to just basically sap all your time, energy, motivation so that you felt like you did something and now you'll just shut up and go about your business? Maybe. But even if it's not that, even if all of this stuff is well-intentioned, that's what you effectively just did. This armchair politics is not moving the needle. You had no effect on your county, on your region, on your state. You had zero effect, definitely zero effect at the national level, unless you have, hundreds of thousands of followers, or you're able to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. There is no politician in Washington that cares what you tweeted or retweeted or shared on Facebook. They literally could care less. It made no difference whatsoever. Now, I know that's going to hurt a few people's feelings, but let me just confess, I am a previous armchair political person. That's what I used to do, and I really thought I was making a difference until I read a book by an author whose name I don't remember. He actually was writing from the Democratic side of things, and he called it armchair politics. He's like, you're not doing anything. You're not helping anybody get elected. You're not helping any laws get changed. You are wasting your time. And that resonated with me very deeply. And I was like, wow, that's what I've been doing for the past, I don't know, decade. is I've been wasting my time and making no difference whatsoever. And it was that moment when I said, local politics, that's where I can actually make a difference. Because if anybody watched my YouTube channel about medicine and nutrition, I'm a huge believer in put the majority of your time, effort, energy, stamina, willpower into things that are going to give you 80% improvement, 80% of the health of whatever your goal is, right? So armchair politics, thumbing and hearting and retweeting, that's a 1% solution. You might change one person's mind in the whole country, but probably not. But if you refocus your attention on local politics, you can have a huge difference in your local school district, in your county commission, in your regional part of your state. And even at the state level, you don't have to have nearly as many followers or friends or $100 bills in your back pocket to have an impact, to actually make a meaningful difference. And the more that national politics goes down this road it's going down currently, I feel like more and more so what we should be focusing on as Tennesseans is protecting Tennesseans from the federal government. Yep. And we've seen some recent legislation to that effect, and that makes me very happy that there are local politicians who also see that. Like, yeah, we need to protect our borders from illegal immigrants. Yep, we do. Tennessee's not a border state, but yet now somehow it is a border state. Yep. We need to protect our liberties from the federal government increasingly as we go down this road. And I'm sad that that's true, but I think that it's 100% true. And I think it's something that we all need to be focusing on. So when you're busy on Twitter retweeting something, you're not protecting the liberties of your neighbor and your family and yourself. You're wasting your time. But if you refocused all of that energy and started actually knowing what the county commission has on their agenda and going and having a voice in that, and what's the school board going to be talking about next month? Who is my county commissioner for my district? Who's my school board member? Who's my state rep? Who's my state senator? What's on the agenda in Nashville? That's actually very quickly becoming more important, in my opinion, than what's being talked about on CNN and Fox News and MSNBC.
I would say that that's more important because of what they're talking about at the national level. The things that they're doing, everything plays out. Okay, it may come from D.C. It's kind of like all the crazy stuff used to come from California and work its way here, and it still does. But now a lot of the crazy stuff it's just coming straight from D.C., going to our states, and then it's implemented at the county level. Well, our counties, and I'll have to admit, I do not follow my county politics near as close as I should. I do follow them. I'm not totally out of the loop. I focus more on the state than I do on the federal, and a lot of it is for the reasons that you've already hit on, because I see the state as the line of defense. Not quite the last line of defense, but the last peaceful line of defense, and really the most potentially effective line of defense. Unfortunately, not everybody in our state government sees that as their role. They seem to think their role is making sure we get anything from the federal government that's out there when it comes to grants or other financial aid packages. And then of course these things make it down to the county level. So many people at the county level are only looking at, well, what can we get from the state? What can we get from the feds? Now, some of those I do know one of the county mayors in this area he's very hesitant to take anything that's got federal strings. I would say he's the exception. I would say a lot of them, hey, if it's money and if they think it's so-called free money, it's like, where do we sign up? Yep. And so it's important to be engaged, also to educate the local government, and of course your state reps and your state senators need to hear from us as well on these things.
Yeah, and if you have trouble educating your county commissioner or your state rep or state senator, then perhaps they need to be, if they're uneducable, they need to be sent home. Yeah. And that's what elections are for. There are so many state level and local county level elected officials who 100% of their time is spent trying to collect scraps from the federal table. That whatever scraps the federal government would throw them, they will jump through any hoop, just like a well-trained house dog. They'll jump through any hoop they can jump through to get the scraps from the federal government's table. And I understand there were decades in the past recently when that was a good strategy. That seemed to work very well. But I think times are changing much quicker now than they used to change. And I think we're quickly approaching a time where that's going to not be a good strategy anymore. The strings that come with those table scraps from our federal government, the negatives are going to greatly outweigh any positives. And that this is all the more reason why people need to know who's your state rep, who's your state senator. Are they a table scraps from the federal government kind of guy, or are they a protect Tennessee citizens' liberty kind of woman or man? That's increasingly becoming much more important, and I'm sad to say that that's true, but I really feel like that it's coming to that point.
Well, it is, and we'll hit some more on that in a minute. But now, you were a county commissioner at one time. How long ago was that?
Yeah, that was, oh gosh, years ago. I don't even remember, but I was county commissioner for one 4-year term, and I was actually the chairman of the budget committee and the chairman of the county commission for 3 of those 4 years. And I'll have to tell you, Dave, I'm proud to have went to medical school and become a doctor, but the proudest moment of my life thus far, as far as professional things go, was when I took my oath of office to become a county commissioner. And then my time on the county commissioner on the budget committee and as the chairman, that I had just a sense of completeness, of happiness. I felt like I was home. I loved it so much. And our first 2 actions as a county commission was, first of all, to cut our pay to the lowest that was allowed by state law. There's a state law that a county commissioner has to make, I think it was $35 a meeting or something. And so we cut it as low as we possibly could to try to save money. So that kind of speaks to my fiscal beliefs, right? And then the second thing we did was we voted to have the 10 Commandments rehung in the courthouse. They had been taken down a few years before that. So that were literally our first 2 successes as a county commission. And I can just tell you, I love the county commission. I love the local politics. And I didn't make a lot of friends because I was fiscally very, very conservative. And Benton County, it used to be the deepest shade of blue that you can possibly imagine. And although now for national politics it goes very red, that the blue is still in the county, right? And so they tend to gravitate around the library and the local schools. And so when we started tightening up budgets for the library and the schools, then that didn't go over well. And so I got sent home with my first reelection bid.
You know, in Tennessee, well, certainly in this part of Tennessee, but I would say most of our districts are rural. And so the school is the biggest employer in the county, in most of your counties. And that means that in these small counties, odds are somebody on the county commission or somebody on the school board has somebody, you know, that not necessarily just kids in the school, but they have people they're related to in their family that are in the school system. And so they're real hesitant to cut anything. It makes it hard for them to do it. But when you're talking about schools, when you're talking about especially libraries today with all the garbage that's being brought in, and here's the thing, a lot of people think, oh, they're not doing that here. I got news for you. They're doing it everywhere. Bet you there's not a library in the state, there's not a school district in the state that's not teaching things that should not be taught in K through 12. I guarantee you there's not one. Some may be better than others about actively trying to keep that kind of stuff out, but I guarantee you that there's none of them that are squeaky clean on that. And people have to remember, they raise their kids, they send them off to college. They go to college and they forget, many of them, what they learned as far as right and wrong back at home with mom and dad in the church on Sunday. and they just go all in for the garbage that they learned in college, and they think it's their job to impart that to the kids they teach or the people that they administer. So
Yeah, I totally
it's a
agree.
problem everywhere. No place is too small or too rural for them to think, oh, it won't happen here.
Yeah, and even the most rural school districts need to understand that the majority of their teachers were educated at a liberal university. And I'm actually listening to a book right now called Lies My Liberal Teacher Taught Me, about all of the misinformation that's taught in public schools about American history, about all things American history. I'm a great reader, listener, actually. I have ADHD, so I've got an Audible book in while I'm out on the farm doing my farmer duties. But the people don't realize it, and that's all the more reason to be involved in your local school district. People are so worried about, oh, what happened to these children at the border in Texas? What happened to these children at a pizzeria in Washington, D.C.? The children you really need to worry about and focus on and try to help as much as you possibly can are the children in your community who are going to grow up and become citizens alongside you in that community. Those are the children. Obviously, first of all, your children, if you have any, your grandchildren, your nieces and nephews, your next door neighbors' kids. But the kids in your community, those are the children of your tribe, and you need to absolutely be interested and involved in their education. And if they're being given miseducation by some teacher who was trained who knows where, you need to know about that. You need to get feedback on that. You need to be in front of the school board pointing that out, because very often school board members are busy with their careers, their jobs, their businesses. They don't have time to watch everything. They need the citizens to be their eyes. Most school board members want to do the right thing, but if they've heard just the side of the teacher and they haven't heard the side of the parents or the grandparents, they may wind up voting the wrong way on an issue, or they may wind up censoring somebody's free speech because they feel like that person's a kook or crazy, right? And that's another big problem with armchair politics. If you're on Twitter and Facebook all day, you are exposed to the things that are actually happening at the federal level, but you're also exposed to all these kooky conspiracy theories. Now, let me be the first to say that many conspiracy theories turn out to have at least a grain of truth, if not turn out to be completely true.
Yeah.
I understand that, but when you spend too much time as an armchair political hack on these websites, you're going to be exposed to foolishness. And if you're not careful, you'll wind up repeating that stuff, and it takes away all of your political capital. When you talk about something that's just obviously unicorns and fairies like that, there's no way that that's true. You lose all political clout, political capital with anybody who knows you. They're like, well, he's a kook. He was talking about this foolishness the other day. Nobody's going to listen to you. But if you focus on real issues at the county level and the state level, you're always going to be the guy, and people will start to come to you. You'll always be that woman who's like, she knows exactly what's going on with the school board or with the county commissioner, with the state reps. You need to talk to her. You need to talk to him, because they actually pay attention to this stuff. You'll quickly become an honored, trusted, valuable member of your local community, because they'll know that you keep your eye on what's actually important for the children growing up in this county, in this city, in this town. Otherwise, you're going to be off watching videos about adrenochrome and some foolishness that's just like, come on, we're all adults here. Don't talk foolishness.
All right. Well, I think we're probably as far as conspiracy theories, I'm really leery. I mean, I hear some things that I'm like, okay, I know that's out there. That's not real. But depending on what the topic is, I'm a little more leery these days of people who will just off the top of their head say that's a conspiracy. A whole lot more so than I used to be. I'm like, I've seen so many things that were totally unlikely, improbable, that 10 years ago I would have said, yeah, there's no chance that's true. But after what I've seen our government do over the last 10 years, I don't write things off as easily. Now, having said that, there are still things out there that are just crazy. and not grounded in any kind of reality. So that's and that's a valid point. If you go spouting those things off, you do lose credibility, and that's a shame because even the things you're right about, you'll be just basically dismissed. You know, you mentioned the local level, and you mentioned education. So here's a good example of why it's important to be involved at the local and state level. So we have a U.S. Department of Education, totally unconstitutional entity. There's nothing in the Constitution that even authorizes it to have a Department of Education. Our state gets money from the Department of Education. And of course, it gets those strings. You call them strings, I call them ropes and chains, okay? And that's where a lot of that garbage that's pushed down into our schools comes from. And we have yet to convince, probably because we don't have enough people demanding it, that our state, and they did talk about it this year before session, that our state say, look, you know what, we're not taking any more federal money for the schools. Now, first off, we can afford to do that. I'm not saying that it won't be uncomfortable. I'm not saying that every job that's probably only there to manage a federally mandated unconstitutional program anyway will still be there, but that's okay. Until our state...
That can make you very unpopular.
Absolutely.
Local administration of your county school district.
Yep.
But now I'll tell you, Dave, I see this same exact thing. Speaking to the conspiracy theories, I've seen this same thing over the last decade that you've seen in politics, in medicine and nutrition. Basically, what's happened over the last really 20 years in medicine and nutrition is that the science, the research, has been completely co-opted by big corporations who their job is to make money. And they have basically turned scientific researchers in both medicine and nutrition into paid marketing organizations. That's basically their marketing wing. And so there's two ways that can happen. One is that you can have a researcher do a study and prove that your product is good for people. And you see this with research in pomegranate juice and almonds. Oh, if you eat just a handful of almonds a day, this will happen or that will happen. And turns out all that's funded by the growers associations of those things, right?
Right.
The second way that corporations can do this is by introducing doubt into the argument. And so they'll say, oh, well, yes, humans have been eating, fatty red meat for the entirety of our existence on this planet. But new research shows that this is a problem, that you need to stop eating this red meat. And so they introduce doubt. Or if we say, hey, I'm pretty sure you spraying glyphosate on oats to desiccate them before they're put in the General Mills box or the Quaker box, I'm pretty sure that's bad for humans to consume that. Well, we did this study and we showed that it's not really bad at all. So they introduced this doubt into the conversation, just like the big tobacco used to do. It's like, well, doctors smoke and it's fine and it's probably not a big deal. If you introduce doubt, then you introduce confusion. And then you wind up with these two sides fighting against each other and nothing really getting done. And so I've seen that in my field of expertise. You've seen it in politics. I think people in any field say, yeah, that's happening in my field too. And anytime that you allow corporations to have undue influence on the science, on the research, or on government, you're going to have problems. It is going to lead to problems. And the longer that collusion continues, the bigger the problems are going to be. And there will come a point, and I fear it's in the near future, where that coalition between big corporations and the federal government and even the state government, it's going to lead to a situation where citizens are going to be faced with choices that they never dreamed they'd be faced with, never wanted to be faced with, but yet nonetheless, here we are. You've got to make this uncomfortable choice because your state government has basically been bought and paid for by the following big corporations.
And you don't have to go to D.C. for that. If you look at the Chamber of Commerce and their influence in every state legislature, including ours, we have these, and not all of our politicians, okay, but you got the Chamber of Commerce and you have the politicians that seem to live just to make them happy. They don't want to, at a minimum, they don't want to be at odds with them. And that's a problem. And a lot of them are to the degree that, and I consider not all, but a lot of our elected officials at the state level, I call them, and the cleaned up version is chamber prostitutes. You can figure out the street version from that. And that's what a lot of them are. And so the chamber, they're kind of like the madams. And a lot of these elected officials are the paid chamber prostitutes. And they get up there and they forget who sent them. They forget who they're supposed to represent. And you know, the sad thing about it is the people they're supposed to represent, not enough of them pay attention to even know what's going on. They only pay attention in election year. This is an election year, so we get all the BS flyers like this one here, and I got several others, all from the same guy. Okay, if we have a chance, we'll hit on that. If not, I'll hit some on the next show. These are flyers I've got. I've got these flyers. I mean, and everybody's getting them if you live in my district. There's just it's like a weekly thing, okay? And if you follow anything any length of time, you can look at it and know what's BS and what's not. But the problem is not enough people pay attention. They don't pay attention, and like I say, I need to do better at the local level. But I know some of the local level just by following the state level, because guess what? They send the stuff down to the counties. And a lot of the counties will sign on to these things. But if you're not following these people...
The problem is that these people that you were just talking about, I used to be one of these people, they are paying attention, but they're just paying attention to the wrong stuff, right? They're busy watching the nightly news, and they're busy on Twitter and Facebook. They're busy with all the big national issues. Yep. You know, what happened? What did Biden say? What did he not say? Is this dementia? Is this not dementia? And that is important. You do need to know about that stuff, right. But it cannot consume you, because if it does, then you don't have time to focus on the really important local issues at the county level and the state level. And you wind up being one of those people that, David, I would say you're not paying attention. This is very important here for our state, for our region, and you're completely in the dark on this. But it's not that they're not trying to pay attention. They've just been tricked into paying attention to the wrong stuff.
Yeah. And as long as you think the answer resides in D.C. and you're not expecting your state to step up, they're not going to step up. Exactly. You only have a few in our state legislature who have any clue about our Constitution. U.S. Yes. Or Tennessee, even though they all take an oath to both of them. Most of them don't have a clue. If they have a question, right. they'll ask a lawyer who I'm not even going to go down that road. They're not even taught the Constitution. They're taught con law, which the key word there is con. Not Constitution, but con.
Yep.
And so they don't have a clue. And they don't feel like it's their job to step in between you and the federal government. They feel like it's their job to get reelected. They feel too many of them feel like it's their job to keep the governor happy, or keep the speaker happy, or the lieutenant governor. Yep. And until the people at the local level start saying, "No, you work for me," and demand something, and that's another reason why, everybody's focused on D.C. D.C. will never fix D.C. Only the states can do that if they're willing to do it. But we have to demand it. They're not going to step up. I'll tell you something else, too. All this focus on the presidential election is just more proof to me that our Constitution is not being followed. Because if our Constitution was being followed, the presidential election, while it would be important, would not be this. You would think we're electing a king.
Yeah.
And that's because for decades now, we've let these guys get by with it, and we've let our states just sit there and say, "Oh, well, there's nothing we can do. It's D.C."
Yeah. And I think that's going to start to change. And this is also another great opportunity for state elected officials to have a meaningful effect. You saw the Supreme Court's decision about the Chevron Deference, yes. And they basically reversed that. That is huge, because up until this point, being the president was being the de facto emperor or king, because whatever the Congress, whatever laws they passed, if there was any ambiguity in that law whatsoever, then the federal department that was in charge of executing that, they got to choose how that was interpreted. Yep. That should never have been the case. That's, first of all, the job of the congressman to write damn laws that are circumspect, right, and that cover every eventuality. That's your job as a legislator, is to write good legislation. But then any ambiguity should be decided in the courts.
Yep.
You see how that protects that protects the branches, that keeps one branch from being overarching. But when you've got the DEA and the FDA and all these other three-letter executive branch organizations who are just able to interpret the law however they want to, you've got a de facto. That's an emperorship. That's what that is, because nobody had any recourse. The only recourse was for Congress to go back and completely write new legislation. But now, with the overturning of the Chevron Deference, now, especially for state legislators and state senators and state governors, they now have a chance anytime that one of these three-letter agencies says, no, this is how it is, you can file a lawsuit and it'll go directly to the courts. And because now we've corrected an error that that's not the job of the executive branch to be interpreting law. That was never their job.
Right.
And now it's no longer their job. It's been taken away from them. I'm sure there's a lot of them that are unhappy about that. And I'm sure that there's a lot of corporations whose nests were feathered quite luxuriously because of that, who are also very unhappy about that. And that makes me happy that they're unhappy. But now what this does is it gives state level politicians and elected officials a chance to say, no, that's not how we interpret this law. We do not agree with your interpretation, and we're going to file a lawsuit, and we're going to let the courts decide this. That is the way the separation of powers was meant to work. And it basically takes the kingship away from the executive branch. Your job is to execute the laws, not to interpret the laws. And now they've lost that ability, which I think is a great victory for liberty in this state and in this country.
Well, especially when you consider most of those agencies we're talking about are not even constitutional agencies.
Right.
I mean, the EPA, that's insane.
Unconstitutional agencies interpreting law, which was never what they were supposed to be doing to begin with. So just think about that. Will that lead to any bad outcomes? I bet it will, and we've seen that over the last 20 years, haven't we?
Oh, yeah, 40 years. I mean, they did this. This was back in the 80s that with the Chevron Deference. And, here's the thing. People get wrapped around, well, hey, we've done it all this way. It's going to be terrible to change it. No, it's not. There's all kinds of other arguments. And I'm not a huge fan of the judiciary in terms of them. I believe the people are the final arbiter.
Yes.
But the judiciary does obviously have a role. But I don't think, the court decided something, and now for here on out, that can never be reevaluated. Well, okay, we could never reevaluate separate but equal. We could never reevaluate anything. If it's like, the court's done, we've done it for so long. The argument is we've done it for so long. Well, if we've done it wrong for so long, we've done it wrong for so long. The Constitution is supposed to be the law, not somebody's interpretation of the Constitution. So anyway.
Absolutely. And I'll give you a great example that people will understand. How many of you guys have been driving down the interstate and you're listening to a radio or listening to a book and you're talking to your spouse and you look up and you've missed your exit and you went 20 miles down the interstate in the absolute wrong direction? There's only one choice. Nobody who's sane would say, we've come this far. We've been doing it this long. We might as well just keep going. No sane person's going to say that. As much as you hate to do it, you're going to have to turn around. And I can tell you from personal experience, as somebody with ADHD who has missed more than one exit in my life, that is a miserable journey back to where you made the mistake. To have to turn around and go 20 miles the other direction. That's not a fun journey. It's often there's some heated words with your fellow occupants of the vehicle, and you're trying to explain yourself. But yeah, it's no fun to turn around and do a 180. But if you're going in the wrong direction, that is the only solution. You have to turn around and go back to where the mistake was made, and that's what we've seen the Supreme Court do 2 or 3 times now lately. And so that gives me great hope for the judiciary that maybe they don't feel like once we've done it this way, we need to always do it that way. I've seen a couple of U-turns, and it makes me more comfortable, not comfortable, but less uncomfortable than I used to be. Right.
So let's if we could move on to the 4 boxes of liberty, because I think people definitely need to hear that. So let's hear from you an explanation of the 4 boxes of liberty, because they all apply to what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Everything we've talked about applies to this. So there's four boxes that people can use to defend their liberties. And you want to go in order because you don't want to jump the gun and go to a box before it's time for that box. So the very first box that you defend your liberty with is the soapbox. And that's running this thing. That's talking to your school board, talking to your county commissioners, talking to your neighbor. It does include posting things on Facebook and Twitter, but those things I would opine need to be local things that your neighbors are concerned about. So the soapbox is so important and so underutilized, but also many people are on what I call a false soapbox. They're on Twitter or Facebook and they're yelling about these national and federal issues. And they're this tiny voice in this humongous wilderness. They think they're being heard. They're not being heard. Nobody at that level cares at all what you have to say, unless you have 100,000 followers or $100,000 to donate. Then they're very interested in what you have to say. But if you're just a regular person, the average person has 100 followers on Twitter. Nothing that you could possibly tweet or share is going to make one iota of difference. So you're on the wrong soapbox. You're on the federal soapbox and you're not having any effect whatsoever. If you stepped off that soapbox and you got on your county commissioner soapbox, your school board soapbox, your state rep, state senate soapbox, you could actually move the needle. You could actually reach out to these people and they're gonna listen to you almost always, especially at the county level. Only in the very biggest counties are they going to try to ignore you. They're going to listen to you. You're going to at least get a few words in their ear that could move the needle, because if you're the first person to say what you say, they're probably going to ignore you. But what if you're the 10th person or the 50th person? Now, all of a sudden, this is a movement. This is a trend. I'm hearing from people. People seem to believe, right? And then all of a sudden, now that gets worked into the legislation at whatever level you're talking about. So people need to be on the rationally correct soapbox.
That's part of your First Amendment.
That's exactly right. That's what it's for. But if you can use your First Amendment right, you can go out in the deep woods here in Midwest Tennessee and scream about stuff at the top of your lungs for 8 hours a day. You will be exhausted. You will feel like you've really put off a shot, but you're not going to make any damn difference whatsoever in reality. Yeah. Well, when you're yelling into the federal government level forest, nobody hears you. No, you're making no difference whatsoever. Stop wasting your energy and your motivation and your time. Start focusing on things that you can actually make a difference on that turn out to be quite interesting. Local politics is not boring if you're paying attention. It's actually quite interesting. It can be quite entertaining, almost more so at times than the federal government, because once you start to really pick up on the innuendo and the subtlety that's going on behind the scenes, you're all of a sudden like, wow, this is a way bigger game than I thought it was. I thought this was just cut and dried, no excitement. There's actually a lot of stuff going on at the state level when you start to pay attention to that. So the second soapbox, now every 2 to 4 years, we get a chance to use that second box, and that's the ballot box. Now we can all look up what's the voter turnout for a presidential election. Federal politics, what's the turnout in a presidential election year versus what we call an off year? And I want to start calling those years on years, because those are the years you really want to be voting, because many fewer people vote. So your vote actually has a magnified effect in an off year. Okay, so you need to vote in every single local election without fail, because those are, and I predict will become even more important than the federal elections. Okay, it matters who's president, it matters who's your senator and who's your U.S. rep. Those things absolutely matter, but so many people just lose all interest when you start talking about state rep, state senate, even the governor. They're like, yeah, okay, but who really cares? It's not a big deal. We're just Tennessee. There's nothing big going on here. That's exactly what the big corporations want you to think, my friend. They want you to think that there's nothing to see here, move along. They want you to think, oh, it's just a confusing argument. Nobody ever wins. You don't have to worry about this or pay attention or vote. Don't worry about this. That's
Or,
exactly what the lobbyists want you to think.
or it's a
And
federal
they
issue. There's nothing we can do about it.
That's right. Nothing you
Yeah.
can do about it. Just you need to go and retweet about Biden on Twitter because that's more fun. Don't worry about this state level stuff. It's time for all Tennessee citizens to say, I'm not falling for that anymore. I'm going to be paying attention to every local issue that comes along because now I understand that's how the federal level issues become federal is because they start building up from the counties and the states until they reach that level. You got to vote every time the voting booth is open, or you're diluting any ability you have to make a meaningful difference.
And if you're not watching local, like I say, I need to do a better job of it. But if you're not watching local, you're not going to know when that program that your county is talking about adopting, that maybe it came from the state or it came to the state from the feds, it's got a lot of chains on it. And all your local elected officials see is dollar signs. And they don't even consider that this is a bad thing or is potentially a bad thing. And so if you don't know, you're not going to be able to speak up because it's going to happen. You'll find out about it after the fact. So
that's right. And I can tell you, Dave, as a previous county commissioner, there were so many things that the county was not benefiting from in any way. And the county commission I was on was very fiscally conservative. And we said, we're going to cut that. To which one of the executive branch of the county government, they would come back and say, oh, we can't, we're not allowed to cut that. That was part of a federal grant. And so you can't cut that. That, like, literally in order to accept that grant, we had to basically vow and promise the future prosperity of this county. We had to say we're going to fund this so much a year in perpetuity, forever, because we took this 100,000 or whatever from the federal government. We cannot cut that from our county budget. And there are so many things like that in county budgets, and I would guess in state budget as well, that if you try to cut it, they're like, nope, can't cut that because that was part of a federal mandate or that was part of a federal grant. And we agreed in writing that we would never cut that from the budget.
Right. So ballot box, anything else on that?
Yeah. So the ballot box, I mean, I really think that most people understand, yes, I should vote in every election. I get it. But people see that as a chore. They don't see that as a sacred honor to get to vote, a sacred duty to get to vote. It's very important, and you should not neglect that at all. If you can remember your dentist appointment and you can remember that show that's coming on Netflix tonight, there's no excuse for forgetting to vote. I'm sorry.
Let me say something on that, though, and this is just me speaking. I don't want we got enough stupid people that vote, okay? If you don't pay attention to what's going on, if you don't have a clue about what's going on at the state level and the garbage that's coming down from the feds to the state and what you need to watch for, if you don't know anything, I'm fine with you not voting, okay? We have enough stupid people, uninformed people that vote. So get educated and then vote.
And so that's part of the soapbox, because when you're up on your soapbox, spouting your position, your beliefs, you're going to come up against other people on the other side who are on their soapbox. And that's a great learning opportunity. If you go into that with the mindset of a student, like I don't know everything, I'm just trying to learn. That's exactly, I love having discussions with people from the other side because I might learn something. So that's actually part of what the being on your soapbox does, if you're paying attention at the local level, is it actually helps you learn about these things. You'll be like, oh, I didn't know about that. I got to go look that up. So then our third box, which is very often neglected, vilified by most people, is the jury box. People do not know the power that a jury has, especially a grand jury. They have no idea, and it's only partially their fault because the vast majority of us have never had a civics class. We do not know the power of the jury, especially the grand jury. We don't know. We just think that you sit there and the DA comes in and says, look, we arrested this guy and here's what we got, true or not true. Then you say true and then you go home. That's the minimum of what a grand jury has the power to do. Now, if anybody's watching this and you're like, what's he talking about? I was on the grand jury. That's it. That's literally what you do, is true bills or not true bills. That's all you do. My friend, It's time to start doing some learning. It's time to go back to school. Even if you have to buy a used civics textbook off eBay, you need to start looking into the power of a jury. And I'm not just talking about jury nullification, although that is a very real power that juries have. I'm talking about the power of a grand jury to basically indict people that you would never think that a local grand jury would have the power to indict. Any local grand jury has almost executive level power if they know that, but most people don't know that. And so again, like you said earlier, if you don't know these things, you maybe should sit home and be quiet until you've learned these things, because this is a very, very powerful box that most people do not have a clue about. The power of the regular jury to nullify. If it's a law that they feel is unjust, they can nullify that. And juries have always had that power since the founding of the United States. Now, many DAs and many judges will specifically tell the jury, you do not have the power to nullify.
So, okay, on what legal grounds can they tell them that?
Exactly right. And when you start looking into this, there's case law where that's been said in other cases, but where is it in the Tennessee state constitution? I can't find it. I've read it. I've read all the different ones. I cannot find anywhere where it says that you cannot nullify what you consider to be an unjust law. In my opinion, that is the right of every adult citizen of this country who doesn't have a felony, who has the rights to serve on a jury. You have the right to nullify if in your heart you believe that law to be unjust. And so many things would just fall by the wayside and go away if people knew about that power and started to exercise that power, not just egregiously and randomly, but when you had somebody who was charged with a law that you feel to be either unconstitutional or unjust, in the heart of a righteous man, this law is unjust, you have the power to say no. And so here's something I didn't know that many people don't know, Dave. It takes all 12 jurors.
Right.
They all have to say guilty. If one juror says not guilty, that's it. It's over. You would be surprised how many grown Tennessee citizens think, oh no, it's probably, a majority or I don't know, 9 out of 12. I don't know how many it takes. No, it takes all 12. And thus the power of nullification. Now that's a very powerful tool. It should never be used lightheartedly. It should always be only from the heart of a righteous man or woman that you make that decision. But even now when we talk about the grand jury, Lord have mercy, Dave. The power that a grand jury, an empowered, educated grand jury, the power that they have is almost without equal anywhere in the world, where you can just take 12 random registered voters from a constituency. The power that they have, if they know they have that power, is a glory to behold.
Is there anything in our state constitution that mentions the power of jury nullification? Is there anything in our Tennessee code that mentions jury nullification?
I think there is something in the code. I've had trouble finding it in any of the different versions of the Constitution, but you can find it in the TCA. But where you really find it is in the case law, in the Attorney General, his opinions that come down. As a county commissioner, we always had to be worried about what the Tennessee Attorney General, he has opinions on stuff. And it's literally just that, his educated opinion. And so you will find case law about that. But when you start looking at the founding documents, it's very hard to find where that's not a right that is reserved to the people.
Okay. So we got ballot box, we've got, soapbox, ballot box, jury box, and the last box.
The last box is a box that I honestly think, even though some people think they want to get to that box, I think that's a box that we never want to utilize. And that's where our Second Amendment comes in, to protect the First Amendment and the Ninth and the 10th and all the others, is the bullet box. And as a rational adult human, as a father and a grandfather, I'm just saying we never want to utilize that box. But that is the final box, and there are quotations from the founding fathers that allude to that box, either directly or indirectly, and they say things like, The tree of liberty is watered with. And where did that water come from? It's from this last box, which is the bullet box, which is the box that we never want to go to, but it is the box that many people feel pushed towards. If you'll look at the gun purchases over the last since basically 2019, right? If you just look at that, people are considering this. They may not be consciously considering it. It's saying it out loud, but they're thinking about that. Or at least they have feelings or thoughts about that in their heart of hearts. We don't ever want to get there, people. I'm just telling you, you don't want to get there. There are ample examples in history and from other countries where it did go that far. It never turns out well for anybody. So we've got to focus on those first three boxes and using them 100% so that we never have to go to that fourth box.
Well, I won't say it never works out well, because that's actually the box that our founders had to use. But
100%.
it is not the first choice, okay? It's not something that they went into lightly or boom, overnight. I mean, if you think about it, the boxes you mentioned, the soap box, the ballot box, and the jury box to some degree, which that actually started early on with in the founding era. And then, of course, they had to resort to the cartridge box.
Yep.
And this is what I don't understand. If you look at our revolution, our American Revolution, originally it was a revolution in the mind first, was that government exists to serve the people, okay? That the consent of the governed. That government isn't there to keep limits on our freedoms. It's there to protect our freedoms, respect our freedoms, protect our freedoms, and that when it becomes abusive, that ultimately we have a right to do what our founders did. But now we have something that they didn't have. We have a constitution that lays out specifically the designated powers that belong to the federal government, things specifically the states cannot do, and oh, by the way, everything else is supposed to stay at the state level. And of course we have...
And be reserved to the people.
Absolutely. And of course we have, our First Amendment rights. We have everything in our Bill of Rights, which was originally a restriction just on the federal government, not on the state government. But ultimately, if things all go bad, we do have the Second Amendment. Now, here's what I don't understand. The Second Amendment is basically the equivalent of shoot your government day, okay? That's what it is, all right? Now, we're not hoping to get there. We're hoping we don't have to get there. It's not a good scenario for anybody, okay? That's not to say that there aren't people that don't deserve it. I'm just saying as a whole, it's not a good thing to get there.
It's never a good thing to get there. And if you are any student of history and you read about the founding fathers, so many of them, they lost their livelihood. Everything. They lost loved ones. They lost their life. They lost parts of their body. They lost entire societies. That's never the answer that you want.
Right.
But it might become the answer that we ultimately have to resort to if all our other three boxes fail.
Right. Well, but here's what I'm getting at. There are a lot of people who will tell you what I just told you, that yes, the Second Amendment is not only about personal self-defense, it's about the ability to protect and it says, remember the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the defense of a free state, but it incorporated individual rights, because all the militia were your guys from 16 to 60 or whatever. So it does protect individual right to self-defense, but it was specifically what they had in mind was to protect the states if the federal government that they were creating, with a whole lot of apprehension, by the way, became too tyrannical. That, hey, look, we will have the ability to deal with that issue if we have to. Now, a lot of people will tell you that. A lot of politicians will say, yes, that's what it's for. And then you will say nullification, and they'll say unconstitutional. So here's my question. That makes no sense to me. So you're saying we only have the right to, we can protest, we can use our soapbox, okay? We've got the ballot box, we've got the jury box, and if things go really bad, we've got the cartridge box. But you're going to tell me that ultimately we can only shoot them. We can't just tell them no at the state level. Our state can't just say, hey, federal government, this is unconstitutional. We are not doing it. I'm told by all lawyers tell me that's unconstitutional, Dave. Can't do it.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
It makes no sense. I totally agree with you. And this is where state politics, state elections are going to start to have a much bigger impact on the citizens of this state if the federal government keeps doing what it's been doing for the last few decades. We're going to have to basically circle the wagons around this state, not only from illegal aliens, but also from the overreaching federal government. We're just going to have to say, no, look, this is our state line. We do not condone that. We are not going to be party to that. And so then what you do is you put it in the federal government's hands. It's like, do you want to come in here? Because I don't know how many guns are owned by Tennessee citizens. But, probably the best bet would just be to leave us alone and let us have our way as a sovereign state, which we still are, I'm sorry to say. I know that offends people, but every state is a sovereign state. That's the way it was founded. Yep. And I don't know of any federal legislation that made that not so.
Absolutely. So I think that people have to, when they're looking, and this is an election season, when we have these state reps and state senators who are out campaigning, you need to find out where they stand. Ask them first, do you believe in the Second Amendment? Do you believe that we have the right with the Second Amendment to defend against a tyrannical government? And if they say yes, well, then ask them, okay, as a sovereign state, can we tell the federal government no when it's doing something unconstitutional? And if they don't give you the obvious correct answer to that, you need to find somebody else.
That's right.
Because if they won't stand up for us, we don't need them. They're no good.
But if you're paying attention to national politics on Twitter and Facebook, you're not going to be there at that rally to ask that guy that face-to-face question. You got to be there. You got to stand up, put your hand up, and ask that question, and then ask the follow-up question. And if you don't like the answer, feel free to call that out as unconstitutional, and feel free to vote elsewhere.
Absolutely. And
that's what we've all got to start doing, or we're going to lose the liberties that we've enjoyed for so many decades.
Absolutely. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on. I know you've got something else you have to do here real quick. I'm sorry we didn't get to discuss the book about American nations, and hopefully I can get you back on soon and we could spend some more time on that.
It's a fascinating book. And now let me leave with this. Everybody watching this, if you haven't read a book in the last year, you're part of the problem, not part of the solution. Just do an internet search. What did the founding fathers say about an educated populace? If you haven't read a book in the last year, then you're not part of the educated populace. You need to get busy being an educated citizen and being an active citizen at the local level. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Dave. I'm going to keep watching your stuff. I love the work you're doing, and I don't want you to ever stop.
Well, hey, I really appreciate that, and I appreciate you coming on, and I want to get you back. Now, I got to have you back twice because I got to have you back to finish this discussion, and then I got to have you back to talk about what you do with nutrition and health.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. Well, thank you. You have a good day. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night. All right, we're going to scroll. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to watch our program tonight. Please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons as well as the notification bell so you never miss an episode. It really goes a long way to help keep us on the air to bring you the program. We appreciate your support. Check out our radio podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and other platforms as well. Sign up for our weekly newsletter at our website, teeninformer.com, and be sure always to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Remember to tune in later for our regular show time tonight when we'll talk about some of the new laws that took effect yesterday in Tennessee, some that should have passed, and more Tennessee politics. Also, be sure to catch our 4th of July special at 6 p.m. featuring our guest and friend Mike Meharry from the 10th Amendment Center. If you're not familiar with Mike or the 10th Amendment Center, you definitely want to watch this. The 10th Amendment Center is a great resource, and he is a great speaker. This is a pre-recorded show, but it is certainly worth watching. Join us next week when our guest will be Danielle Goodrich from East Tennessee Freedom, here to expose how our state is conspiring with the Biden administration to push the climate change hoax. And on Tuesday night, our guest will be Ed LeCompte, State Senate candidate for District 10, challenging incumbent Rhino extraordinaire Todd Gardenhire. Hope you'll join us. That's it for now. Good night from Paris, Tennessee, that is.